Welcome to the Pulsating Biology, and in today's video of cell structure and functions, we will be covering vacuole and endoplasmic reticulum and some of the previous topics that were not discussed earlier. We will also be going through the entire chapter once again, so it will be helpful for every student to understand, for whether for the ones who have not watched the previous videos. Well, we will begin the topic with a very easy organelle, and the one we all are very much aware of, that is the vacuole. Well, the structure of vacuole can be understood by giving a look at the diagram of a plant cell. Well, usually or mostly the vacuole is absent in an animal cell and it is only present in plant cell. This is often asked in your MCQs based questions that in which cell their vacuole is absent. So in animal cell the vacuole is absent, whereas in plant cell the vacuoles are present. Well, when it comes to the structure of a vacuole, it takes about almost most of the space of the plant cell, and it has many more functions. That is. One of the functions that vacuole have is that it is a storage organ. Mainly, vacuole plays a very important role for the storage of certain substances, whether they are ions, whether they are molecules, or any other substance. It consists of a fluid inside it that is known as the sap vacuole. The sap vacuole is called so because it is in a liquid form and it is inside the vacuole, thus it is known as the sap vacuole. The vacuole is also the disposal site for many of the organelles that are inside the plant cell. At last, the vacuole mainly contains certain pigments that are also very helpful in the photosynthesis, mainly in the chlorophyll or in the related to the chloroplast. So it contains a relative pigment. Thus, the vacuole plays a very important role as a storage organ and as a disposal organ. It is a fluid inside it that is known as a sap vacuole and it contains pigment. All right. Also to remember that in a plant cell or any kind of a bacterial cell or a virus cell, whether where a vacuole is present, there is only one vacuole. None of the cell has more than one vacuole in its side, or it only resides on the one vacuole in itself. Well, that's it for the functions. Now let's come on to the topic that how the vacuole is originated. Well, the vacuole is originated from the endoplasmic reticulum. It is originated from the Golgi body, or you call it as a Golgi complex also, and it is originated by the cell membrane. So, from these three organelles, the vacuole is basically originated. We also need to learn that vacuole are basically of two types. It is a food vacuole or it can be a contractile vacuole. Now, what is the difference between a food vacuole and a contractile vacuole? Well, the food vacuole is formed by phagocytosis. Now, what is meant by phagocytosis? Phagocytosis is basically a process in which the cell engulfs a solid material inside itself. There's a difference. Please don't confuse the term phagocytosis and pinocytosis among each other. Phagocytosis is the process in which there is a solid engulfation. There is only a solid engulfation in the phagocytosis. Well, in the pinocytosis, there is only the liquid engulfation. So please don't confuse this. So the food vacuole is always formed by the phagocytosis. Well, the contractile vacuole is basically responsible for maintaining the concentration of ions. And what is the purpose of contractile vacuole? Well, the function of contractile vacuole is that it pumps the excessive water out of the cell. So the vacuole is originated by endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi complex, or the cell membrane. And the vacuole are of two types, either the food vacuole or the contractile vacuole. Each of them plays a different role and are for the different purposes. Since we have discussed about the organelles and talked about the ones that were left in the chapter, Let's go through it once again and the ones that we have discussed in the previous videos. Let's talk about mitochondria and give it a full review. That mitochondria is basically the powerhouse of the cell because it provides ATP. Now, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, that stands for three phosphate groups. It itself says that, and it is responsible for the site of aerobic respiration. Basically, it releases the energy that is used in the different metabolic processes in the cell or in the body of an organism. Well, what is the most important thing about mitochondria is that it can produce its own protein. It has DNA and the ribosome in its structure itself. That's why the protein is synthesis very easily. Well, these are all the things that you need to remember of mitochondria. The next thing we discussed earlier was the nucleus. We all know that nucleus is a very important part of the cell. It almost controls the entire cell. It is the control center and it has its own RNA and the protein, or you can say that's why it makes up the protein, since it have its own RNA. It also have its structure that is known as the nucleolus. It has a nuclear membrane and the nucleoplasm, and it also consists of the nucleopores. The perforated pores that you see are known as the nucleopores that allows the substances to pass in and out of the cell. All right, similar does the nuclear membrane functions. Okay, so nucleus is not present in the bacteria. It is present in the virus, in the animals, in the plant, but it is not present in the bacteria. All right, we have discussed earlier that in the prokaryotic and the eukaryotic, there are two kinds of the cell in which the nucleus are present. That is in the animal cell, plant cell. In the eukaryotics, we have mushrooms, we have fungi category, we have multiple categories in which the nucleus is involved. All right. What is the function of nucleolus? So nucleolus is basically important in synthesizing the ribosome. We do not have been asked a lot of detail in the syllabus of O-levels about nucleolus. So all you need to remember is that what is the function of nucleolus? It helps in the synthesizing of ribosome. Okay, so the next thing that we need to discuss is the chloroplast. We've discussed it earlier, so chloroplast plays a very important role in the photosynthesis since it has contains and it has the pigments that absorb the light energy from the sun and converts it into the chemical energy that is there. It makes up its own food. They are the heterotrophic organisms. All right, it consists of a pigment that I've already mentioned earlier, that is the chlorophyll, which helps in production of the food. It also consists of its own DNA and the ribosome. That's why it is able to produce its own protein. Any substance, please remember I've mentioned is multiple times that any organelle that has its own DNA and has its own ribosome are able to function as the production of protein. They can synthesize protein on their own and they are not dependent on any other organelle for their food. Well, next thing that we're being asked for to be discussed in the syllabus for how the cell forms up an organism. How the single cell basically in turn forms up an organism. That is why it says zygote basically transformed into a proper man or a female. Well, the journey all starts from the cell, which is basically the basic unit of life, that in turns into a tissue. This is the example that I gave, that how a cell turns into a human being with the help of a system that is the circulatory system. Let's study with the basic, that is how a cell is the basic unit of the life. It joins together to form the tissues. Tissues join together and work together to form the organ. When the organs work together, they form a system or the organ system, and then it turns into our organism when the multiple system joins together. Let's have a look at the example that says when the cells are combined together and forms a muscle tissue. They are kind of the muscle tissue, for say smooth muscle tissue, for say a skeletal muscle tissue, for say, or the cardiac tissue. So we are talking about the heart in this example. Thus, you will take and consider the cardiac example. The muscle tissues or the cardiac muscle tissue join together to form a heart that basically pumps up the blood and is a very important in our circulatory system. That forms a system that is a circulatory system, and then it forms the human being's heart. Thus, in this way, the organism is formed. So, the next thing we need to discuss is how the cell is specialize. Now, what is meant by the term specialize? It means that how a cell transforms into an organism. There are two cells that are the two gametes in the male and the female. We have in male gamete we have a spermatogonia, and in female we have a oogonia. So in male gamete the chromosomes that are present are X and Y, and in female we have X and X. The both of them contain 23 number of chromosomes. There are total 46 number of chromosomes, but in pair we say that there are 23 number of chromosomes. Thus 23 and 23 gives up 46 number of chromosomes in the zygote, that by the help of mitosis or by the help of meiosis it divides. When it divides by mitosis, then that all the divided cells have the same number of chromosomes as the zygote consists. But if we talk about meiosis, the number of chromosomes reduces to half. All right, so this is how the zygote turns into an organism with the help of mitosis, and it produces which kind of cells? Somatic cells. It is not involved in the reproductive cell, it is involved in the somatic cells. uh, we discuss a similar thing over here, that how a zygote turns into a baby. So zygote basically develops into an embryo, that develops into a fetus, that develops into a baby, and then it is delivered out of the fetus. So this is the process of meiosis and mitosis that I've earlier have discussed. In this diagram, I'll tell you once again how we have discussed it, that when there are a number of cells that are joined together in an organism or in a system, basically it is not necessary that each would be responsible for anything. There may be a group, there may be a trio, there may be a four number of cells that are responsible for a single function, but they are always responsible for different functions. Let's say this one is responsible for heart, let's say this one is responsible for making of limbs, this one is responsible for making of liver, let's say this one is responsible for making of pancreas. So each one of these cells is responsible for a different function. Then we have the two processes that we discussed, how the protein is synthesized. So in your syllabus, we have been asked the names. One is the transcription, another is the translation. Transcription and translation are the two processes that helps us together to form the protein. That's it for the video. We have discussed vacuole in this video, and please do let me know if you have any queries in the comment section below. I will be solving it. Thank you.